So keeping warm on a budget is hard, obviously, and it turns out that keeping warm on a budget when you live in a cottage in the middle of absolutely nowhere is even harder still. I moved in here in August, and when I went to potentially think about turning the heating on in autumn, I had to get the Rayburn serviced because the previous occupant couldn't tell me if they'd had it done, and obviously the last thing I wanted was for it to fail or blow up on me or anything like that. So I got it serviced, and then I got my oil ordered. Oil is really expensive at the moment, people. I know this seems like a really obvious thing to say, but oil is really expensive, and the minimum amount you can order when you're on an oil-fired heating system equates to, if you're lucky, the cheapest about £300. And that's if you spend a good bit of time digging around and getting quotes from different companies, because unlike mains supply gas, there aren't price comparison sites, and the oil heating industry isn't regulated in the same way. So oil companies can charge what they like, and it's up to you as a customer to go and haggle with them or price hunt. And being on benefits means that I have to do a fair bit of price hunting, which is incredibly time consuming. But anyway, I got my oil ordered, finally got to turn the heating on, and then the day later it broke. And because Rayburn's and Arga heating systems are not especially common, it's not like a gas system where if your boiler blows up, you can call a technician and someone will come out the same day or the day afterwards. That just doesn't happen with oil heating systems. The company that I had to service it, I think they cover a large amount of East Anglia. So it took about 2 weeks for the engineer to have a slot available to come out and have a look at the Rayburn and see what was wrong with it. And then, of course, there's more money for the call-out fee and the part that needed replacing. So all in all, it was the best part of about £1,000 in order to be able to just turn the heating on in the autumn. And about a week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, I noticed that the oil was getting low. And you don't want to let the oil level in your tank get too low, because apparently sludge accumulates in the bottom of it, and the last thing you want is that getting into your heating system, because then of course that's another expensive engineer call out to come, and I don't know what they do to fix it, but something obviously. So I had to do another oil order after only 2 months and a bit from the first oil order. So that's another 300 odd pounds. Apparently, on average, people go through between 1,500 and 2,000 litres of oil per year. If that's the case, that means that my heating costs, my utility bills, heating and electricity, will have near enough tripled from where I moved here from when I was on a mains gas supply. So to try and keep my oil reserves lasting for as long as possible, I have been using the little wood burning stove that I've got in my living room. My living room's pretty small, but that does mean that I can make it pretty nice and cozy by lighting a fire and keeping it going for the day and shutting the door. So I thought you might be interested to see my process of getting the fire lit so that I can stay cozy for the day. I've already done the boring cleaning, so you won't have to watch me do that. How I start out is I use a layer of this stuff called e-coal at the bottom, which is compressed olive stones. Hopefully you can see this. I can only fit about 6 pieces in the bottom, but it's good because it means that when the wood burns down, this then takes the heat from that and gives me a longer burn than just the wood on its own would. So there's a few pieces of that in the bottom. Next is a layer of kindling, and I've got some really nice kiln dried kindling that I got from a local farm store. So I'll put a few pieces of this down to start with to give it a base. And then on top of that, I've got these, they're called wood wall firelighters. These are brilliant. They're made of all natural materials and they're FSC certified. So they're all nice and sustainable and good for the environment. So this is what they look like. So one of those goes in here. And then because I've just finished a bag of kindling, I've held on to the scraps at the bottom of the bag, which I don't know if you can see. There's a few just loose, scruffy bits here that are too small to go in the kindling pile on their own, but are really handy to put in addition to the larger pieces of kindling to help it catch well when you light it. Similarly are the ends of the box of firelighters, because there's loads of these nice scrappy bits here that have got wax on them or something, and I like to sprinkle just a few of those pieces across the width of the fire so that it then catches nicely across the whole width of it. So I'll put a few more pieces of kindling in on top. I don't know if this is how you're supposed to do it, but this works for me. And then on top of that, I've got some really nice silver birch logs at the moment, and this has got some really nice dry bits of bark on it, so hopefully that will catch really well. So that goes in on top. Again, I don't know if you're supposed to put the log in before the fire's lit, but this works for me because my mobility is a bit questionable sometimes, and the last thing I want to be doing, even though I've got fireproof gloves, the last thing I want to be doing is having to open up the fire unnecessarily if I can avoid it. So now it's time for the fun bit. Just before I light it, I like to open the door to where the ash is collected at the bottom and just leave it cracked very, very slightly, because it helps to pull even more air in through the fire and get it lit and going as quickly as possible. I don't leave it open for very long, maybe only for 10 or 15 seconds once it's lit, but it really does help to get it going quickly. So here we go. I'll give it a few seconds. And there you go, you can see that that's starting to catch really nicely. So now I'll close the bottom door here, but I'll make sure to leave this vent open until the fire's really going, just to make sure that it doesn't get deprived of oxygen. And then once it's going, I'll just close it maybe 2/3 of the way over so that the log doesn't burn out too quickly. And that's it. That's how I keep my living room nice and cozy for the day when it's this cold.